How's it going, and welcome back to JamesChats. Today I'm going to be continuing my Star-Lord cosplay and showing you all how I took this helmet and turned it into this helmet. Now thankfully Star-Lord is a really popular character and there are a bunch of people already cosplaying him, so there are some good pre-built options already on the market. There are really two mainstream options. One is from Hasbro and it's like a Bluetooth speaker helmet, and then there's this one from a company called Xcoser? I'm not really sure how you pronounce it. It's a company that does a lot of cosplay stuff. The Hasbro one is a little bit more on the pricey side, and in my opinion it's a little too bulky, and then this Xcoser one is a little cheaper and smaller. All right, let's dive into everything I did to this helmet. Now of course before spray painting this there was a lot of prep work that went into it, and that involves removing all of the innards like the foam padding and the wiring and the little light up eyepieces. It involved removing any branding with a Dremel, so there's like the Xcoser logo on the sides here, and I removed that with Dremel, sanded it down, and then I also used the Dremel to remove any extra plastic or sharp pieces that I didn't want there. Specifically on the inside around the eyepieces where plastic would hold the little lenses in, that just stuck out a little too far for my comfort, and you know, I didn't like sharp pieces of plastic right next to my eyeballs. So I took all that out and decided to just hot glue them back in place. Now when you're removing the branding on the side of the helmet, be more patient than I was and just take your time with it, because the more work you put in, the better it's gonna look. You can tell that I removed something there. It looks better than it did with the branding, but I could have taken more time and really meticulously sanded this down and made it look much better. I also decided to cut out these little vent holes in the front, because without doing so, it got very stuffy and warm and the lenses fogged up, and it was just not a good time. So once I did that, once I took care of that, much more comfortable to wear, and all of that warm breath can escape out these vent holes. Well, not all of it, most of it. It's still a little stuffy in there, but much better. And I found that just an X-Acto knife is not enough to cut it, and using a little bit that came with my Dremel didn't look good on the first go. So what I did was I took a drill with a very small drill bit, drilled 3 holes, and then used the X-Acto knife to cut out the excess. This was the best way that I found to do it. There was probably a better way to do it out there, but that's just my experience, what worked for me. Now let's move on to painting, and this thing was a beast to paint. It took 5 cans. We're talking primer, gold, gunmetal gray, silver, and of course clear coat. And we didn't have the luxury of spray painting the different colors as individual pieces because it's all one unit. So that meant a lot of masking tape and a lot of time waiting. So let's just take this step by step. First, I applied 3 coats of primer. Then I applied gold to all of the gold areas. And at this point, you don't need to worry about overspray because that is going to be covered up in future steps. Then after allowing that gold to cure for a couple of days, because I wanted to make sure that it stayed on the helmet and none of it got peeled up, I then applied masking tape to all of the gold surfaces. This part is extremely tedious, and it took almost an hour for me to cover all the gold with masking tape. Have patience when you're doing this. And having an X-Acto knife as well as some very, very fine point tweezers are an absolute must here. Highly, highly recommend getting some of those tweezers because it was life-saving when putting masking tape on this helmet and taking the masking tape off, but we'll get there. Once all that masking tape was on, I then applied all of the gunmetal gray paint, and I used 3 coats of that. And once all the gunmetal gray was on, I took all of the masking tape off of the gold. Now this is the part where you want to exercise the most caution and the most patience. There are some places where the paint might be more adhered to the tape than it is to the helmet, and if you just go willy-nilly tearing all the masking tape off, you might end up pulling off some of the paint and you're screwed. You have to like do it over again. Use the X-Acto knife if you need to, and use those fine tip tweezers. After removing that masking tape, I decided to let the helmet cure for another couple of days just to make sure that the gunmetal was really adhered to the helmet and fully cured. Then once again, after allowing the gunmetal to cure for 2 days, it was back to the masking tape so that I could mask off all of these silver parts. That took about 50 minutes. So yeah, it's very tedious and very time consuming, but so worth it. Once it was all masked off, I then hit it with the silver spray paint. Now, because all of the silver bits are in the front and there's a bunch of helmet in the back, I just used a plastic bag and taped it to the helmet to sort of protect that. And coincidentally, I had a bag from the Disney store, which had a bunch of Marvel stuff on it. So you know, that's a fun little anecdote for you. And once I had applied 3 coats of silver, I then took all the masking tape off to reveal the semi-final paint job. Again, I want to stress, be cautious when removing masking tape from a spray painted prop because it is so easy for something to not be fully dried or to be adhered to the tape and then pull off of the helmet and ruin your day. So just take your time, use an X-Acto knife, use those tweezers, and it'll be perfect. And finally, it was on to the weathering and final touches. To weather it, I just used black acrylic paint and I added water to it to make it really liquidy. And what you do is you just take that, apply it with a paintbrush, and then wipe it off with a paper towel. And what happens is some of that watery paint gets into the cracks and crevices and it's hard to get out, much like dirt and much like other things that would cause something to look used and old. And so that's like the basic premise of weathering a prop, is to just get into those grooves and cracks and to really add dimension to the prop. At this point, I tried to add some scuffs with silver acrylic paint, but the paint just wasn't really working very well. And I think for that, I'm gonna need to get what's called rub and buff. It's a very popular type of paint used in the cosplay community for weathering and adding, you know, scuffs and scratches to props. And in the future, I'll be getting some of my own to apply to some of these high areas that could be scuffed and scratched. Once I was happy with the weathering, I added 3 coats of clear coat just to really seal it all in. And finally, after about a week, the painting was done and all I had to do was reassemble it. So I hot glued the eye pieces back in place, rerouted all the wiring so that the switch was easier to get to, hot glued that wiring down so that it wouldn't move around or interfere with anything. And finally, I put the foam padding back in, and here's the final product. And I'm really happy with how this turned out, especially considering this is my first time actually masking off a prop and spray painting like different colors and stuff. So really happy, really thrilled. And it looks great. It really does look great. Quick little side note, the Xcoser helmet does not come with batteries, so you have to order those separately. And it's just a couple of coin cell batteries. I can't remember exactly what number they are. I'll leave a link in the description down below. And there you have it. That's my repainting process of the Star-Lord helmet from Xcoser. Xcoser? I really hate that name. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more Star-Lord cosplay stuff, I have a few videos. I've done his elemental blasters, that's not his elemental blasters, the Walkman, and the Atlas scanner from Volume 2. So if you want to see those videos, feel free to watch those. I'll have them linked in the description down below. If you want, you can give the video a thumbs up, you can subscribe to the channel, watch some of my other videos, hit me up on social medias, do all that fun jazz, and I'll see you in the next video.